Lofty shadow, lofty angry fall, lofty says, all kiss say good, put all together again.
Here am I, little jumping Joan. When nobody's with me,
I'm all alone.
Well, my mom would say I started singing when I was like 1.5 or 2 years old. You know, her big thing was that she would find me waking up from a nap, humming to myself.
The highway gleams like the side of a diamond. The rain has stopped and the sun is shining. Cotton candy clouds in a robin egg sky. A perfect day for a perfect drive. Where do you want to go today?
I started, I don't even remember. I think I've always been drawing. The Jamaican school system is on the British system, so when you're 3, you're already in kindergarten, I think, or something like that. So, you know, I was reading, and we had a little easel, and we'd make our little paintings, and I had my coloring books, and I think I did more art because my parents saw that as being a natural inclination of mine, that maybe it wouldn't have been apparent that music was, because music is so much a part of the culture of the Mennonite tradition that it just didn't seem like an unusual thing to like to sing, because everybody sings, and everybody sings in 4-part harmony. For me, art has been, I can either make an imaginary face or I can draw something, but it's really mostly about seeing. It's not really so much about the thing that you're making. In the end it is, but for me it's mostly about, wow, that's a really cool light on that thing. I want to try to draw it. And it keeps me grounded in a real physical place in the present. And I can't think about the future because you have to figure out how you're going to solve this little perspective issue that you just created for yourself. I had a professor who I just did not connect with at all for drawing. His whole idea was that art is communication. And other people have said that about music, that music is communication. And I kind of feel like it is, but it's not. It's more of a conversation. So the second you get your idea out of your head, or you're looking at something and you start interacting with it, then you have to actually listen to what the paper is telling you, and then try to work with that. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I feel like in other kinds of two-dimensional art, there's really the mark of the artist. If a pencil drawing, you make all the marks, and in watercolor you kind of you pick your paper and you pick your brush and your color, and then you kind of have to work with the tools in a really different way, at least in my experience. And I find that sort of interesting to see, if I do this, water will do this and carry the picture forward. But I love the quality of watercolor. I find the translucence, the sort of implied edges and that kind of stuff really appealing. every so often you catch, I'll see sort of like slice of life kinds of movies that I think are just so beautiful. Or like Rothko's paintings, for example. I feel like there's something so profoundly beautiful about what he does. And it's really simple at the same time, but it's not. So that kind of, so I hope that the stuff that I create is kind of in that category of art. It's not trying to jar you. I think there's a place for art that kind of gets in your face and makes you pay attention. But I think it's a lot more profound to experience art that gives you a sense of sanctuary and space. The real sort of tipping point for me were, I think there were 2 albums I can think of, well, 3 in particular. My first album ever was Sting's Dream of the Blue Turtles. And that kind of, like, he uses a lot of fourths in his songs, like intervals, and his sort of musical sensibility on that album was really connected with sort of how I think of songs. Then Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark was my first Joni Mitchell record, which kind of showed me how you can write a song on piano, and the whole like sort of arpeggiated left hand, like completely got ripped off from Joni Mitchell, because that was sort of the first writer that wrote in a way that I thought because I don't really, I play classical music, but I'm not a popular piano player. I just kind of, mess around with chords to make the songs work. Yeah, and that's when I started writing songs. Writing a song is free therapy, is what I've discovered. But all my friends went to see the therapist in college or in high school, but I did not. I was sitting at a piano trying to work it out by writing, lyrics.
Shed the shroud of bitterness, longing and regret.
The songs that I've written over the last however many years are about me trying to work something out. And hopefully, if it's a good enough song, it won't just be a self-indulgent little exercise, but it'll actually, say something. Once I became conscious that you can perform these, I've been trying to make songs that other people can enter into. Okay, so Sky came out of, a couple of things happened. I was working full-time at a nonprofit foundation in Pittsburgh, and was really uncomfortable in the corporate office environment. And my first foray into the world of corporate office politics and stuff. And I knew that's not how I am and who I am. I'm way more direct and understated than all of that. And I had been working on, I had the radio show, and I was also hosting the public affairs programming at YEP and doing all of that and writing songs and starting to perform and hitting open stages and doing all the stuff that you do when you start out. And for me, starting out at 22 or 23 years old, I felt like I still feel really young. I know a lot of people start when they're like 17 or 16, but yeah, anyway. So I quit my job. I was like in Virginia for an event of some kind, and on the drive home I was like, you know what? I just need to quit because I can't make all this fit. And my parents graciously allowed me to move home with them. And at this point, I think I was 26, 27, maybe, something like that. The whole mid-late 20s thing of moving home. And, paid my rent, got a part-time job, and bought a little 4-track recorder and put all of my songs down on the 4-track. It was a fantastic experience of feeling like I was kind of in a groove that made sense.
I'm not alone. I'm the girl with the box of hair.
But I put down, I don't know, it was probably like 15, 16 songs. And then made these little cassettes. I dumped all the tracks down to make these cassettes for my friends with like lyric sheets. And asked them to sort of tell me which ones they liked the best. And obviously I was gonna do what I wanted to do, but I wanted some feedback. But really, Sky for me was a challenge of finishing a project. Up until the point of completing Sky, I was absolutely notorious for everyone I know of starting things and never finishing them. This was, yeah. And for me, it felt like an issue. Like I didn't have the stamina to stick with something through the hard part. And so I finished Sky and had a pretty big emotional breakdown by the time. I was really, really drained by all the challenges that come up with trying to manage, all aspects of making a record. When I had the songs done, the plan was I decided I'd come back to Pittsburgh. I could have made it in Indiana. It probably would have been a fine record. But I knew some people in Pittsburgh and thought, why don't I come back to Pittsburgh? I'll make the record. And then the intention after that was to move to New York City. But I met Randy on the way. He was the bass player for this album and then became sort of an instrumental part in helping me through the post-production part of the album. And of course we started dating. So I made the record, I had the release party, done. I had accomplished what I had set out to do. So that was Sky.
And now the time of the evening that we've all been waiting for. Would you please welcome to the stage Heather Kropf.
So good to see all of you here tonight to share in my CD release party. I'll introduce the band a little later, although a lot of you might know who they are. Let's get started.
So I chose Sky because I mean, the sky's always there, you know, and I love this. I think the sky is one of the coolest things. You know, it's always changing. The colors are extraordinary, no matter what they are. And you can always kind of count on it to be there. It's always kind of sort of sheltering everybody. So I thought it would be a good name for the album.
It's a strange quiet on the jetty. Just me, the salt wind and water, no kites in the sky. For today this ocean is mine, from here to the horizon line. And every wave that comes to shore is alive. Tied down to the highest flying kite around. Never mind the speed of sound, I'm not coming down.
So what else is love? I think the wonderful thing that I learned about making Sky is that you learn of all the things you'd like to do differently for the next one, and it kind of kickstarts the process for the next record. And so for What Else Is Love, my idea, because I had been living in Pittsburgh for a while, I was in a sort of a steady relationship with Randy. I was really sort of thinking about working with what's here. I mean, I was in Pittsburgh, you know, so I tried to like work that as a concept as well, to kind of limit the palette. So I picked a band of people, and kind of with the idea, if we can't make the sounds, maybe they just don't need to be made. I wanted a song or an album that had songs with more dynamic range. I wanted it to be a little bolder. I wanted it to sound a lot. I wanted it to sound bigger. So, you know, we worked at Hyde Studio because they had a real piano, so it wasn't just the keyboard. And I learned that I'm really a keyboard artist now, a keyboard piano player, because a real piano really is an entirely different instrument than a keyboard. So I did it backwards, because the first album, I should have played on a real piano, recorded on a real piano, because they were written on a real piano. And the second album, I should have just recorded on a keyboard because all the songs were written on keyboard. But there's sort of a secret title track to the album, and then there's the title track to the album. And the secret title track is Compass Rose. There's a line in it, well, the idea being dive deep to breathe, which is just that, you know, when you commit to things, there is a different kind of freedom that happens when you say, this is where I am, and this is who I am, and these are the people I relate to. Those decisions are done, so now what? You have all this other freedom and time, and how you're going to spend your time, and really getting into things rather than just skimming the surface. But there's a line in that song, I've got this love and it waits for you, what else is love supposed to do? So I took the line, what else is love? And then Randy had bought me GarageBand for Christmas or something, which triggers a whole different way of songwriting for me. It's almost more jam banding related, because you can set up little grooves and kind of sing on top of them. So all I did was just like put a whole bunch of stuff together, and I had a bass, percussion bass, some keyboard stuff, and kind of created this thing, and then sort of explored the whole idea of what else is love. So that one was recorded after everything else was all done. We just went into the studio and kind of laid that down in a day or two. And that was that record.
I want to remember you this way.
Deliciously dark, beating like a wing, beating like a heart. Deliciously dark, beating like a wing. So I took a couple people's comments to heart, basically, where they were just like saying, why don't you make a record of just you and a piano? Keep it really simple. You do it once a week anyway when you're out playing live. This won't be hard, just redo some of your songs, do some other ones, put out a record. You won't be going into debt to do it. You won't be losing money on the prospect. You won't have to manage anybody. It's just you and a piano. And I was like, well, that sounds great. So I went back to George Hyde's place in Aspinwall and sat at the piano, ran through all 12 songs like I was playing a coffee house, and came back, and Randy and I listened to it, because the other thing that Randy and I wanted to do, I wanted him to produce it, and I wanted to be the artist and not to feel like I was managing a big production. Everything sucked. It was so bad. And it was it was really good. It was good feedback. I should have done this a long time ago. Part of it was some of these songs are, over 10 years old now. And by the way, I had surveyed my email list saying, which songs would you like to hear on this thing? Because I'm not doing this just for me. And so the top 2 from Sky and the top 2 from What Else Is Love were definitely on my list. And then the rest were ones that I sort of selected along with some new songs. And I realized, first of all, I've been away from a acoustic piano for a long time. And so to expect to go back into a studio and to get a good performance musically was a huge expectation. It can't be buried in anything else because there's nothing else to mask that. And then the other thing that I realized is that being emotionally available to a song that was relevant 12 years ago was really hard. And it kind of gave me a new perspective on live performance as well, how much I actually really have to work if I want to convey something that's honest. Finally, I realized, what I've been doing a lot lately is playing with Vince Kamut and Keith Hirschberger. I've been in a lot of duo shows, a lot of trio shows. To me, performance is a lot more enjoyable with people. I like to write by myself, but I like to play with people. I really intensely don't like playing by myself. It's just, so there was something sort of not intuitive about doing this project to begin with. But in keeping with the Hestia theme of the piano is kind of my hearth, the place where I think and come back to. And my voice is my instrument. I thought, well, why don't I bring Vince and Keith into the studio with me, and we'll try a few of these songs. And so that's what's ended up on the record. And then Randy and I did a little bit of overdubbing here at the house. He mixed the whole thing here. We mastered it up at a friend's house who has a studio in his house. So everything was really homemade and home-based for this whole thing. And then I worked on the art and did the design and stuff myself and just sort of had fun messing around with that. And then with the idea that this record is a sort of a nod to some people that have been important to me, saying you should just do this. This record isn't really for everyone. It's not a pick-me-up record at all. It's not even a record that you would want to play all the time, because it does have a lot of depth to it. Lyrically and musically, it's a lot softer.
Take a match to light the candle. I could burn this whole place down. Put the dog on the leash now. The winter wind is whipping round.
Oh, Grace is definitely a metaphor. That song, again, was one of those songs that I wrote over a lot of time. It had sort of an initial life, but it was sort of at a time in my life when I was thinking a lot about, how hard we are on ourselves, and how, it's, if we're not careful, maybe that's not the right way to say it, but if we're not aware, we will actually miss all kinds of opportunities to give ourselves a break. And so Grace is kind of that metaphor. And I don't think grace as a concept is a terribly easy concept for most people. And I think maybe especially for Americans, where we are a society that's built on people being fair. Like, we want it to be fair. Even though it's not, that's sort of the standard. And I don't think there's anything fair about Grace. I think Grace is sort of this wildly generous concept that most people don't understand. But that it has to, you have to experience it yourself to be able to give it to other people.
That was her cigarette, lying by the front step. I can tell by the color of the lipstick stain. And what I know of Grace is that she's heavily made up. She's looking through the keyhole. No one asks her in. There she goes. She was standing right before you. There she goes. Who knows if she'll be back this way again. And that was her cigarette, lying by the front step. She's looking through the keyhole. No one asks her in. Dusty in the corner lies the last forgotten I love you. Rusty as an old nail and tearing every seam. Now there's loose change and it's lying all over the floorboards. What lasts and what gets rearranged? There she goes. She was standing dusty in the corner lies the last forgotten I love you. What lasts and what gets rearranged? And can't you hear her calling? She's been calling. When the heart has nothing left to lose, she comes calling, calling, calling you. And presidents and senators think they live in my country. They think this land